All right, we are here. Broken news. Danny, what do you think about the term broken news for a show where we're not breaking the news, we're just discussing the broken news?
It's like a combination of the Broken Skull sessions, except without the fortune and fame.
All right, so the reason why I'm doing this and the reason why I got Danny to do this is because usually at this time I'm recording We're Live Pal with Andrew Zarian on F4W's channel, but Andrew had work stuff happen today, so we had to cancel that. And I
What a
thought,
day.
I know, not the greatest day to have shoot work stuff going on, but I just figured, I still want to talk about this, so let's see what Big D's doing. And Big D was available, so appreciate you being available. And I think there are two big things, and I think first off, no one's expecting us to talk about this, but the thing that made me so sad was to see that Ice Train passed away.
Yeah.
Gosh,
Yeah,
that dude was so good for his experience at a specific time in WCW, but then it just didn't work out for him.
he's one of those guys that if you actually were watching WCW in the 90s, not just watch a documentary about it, if you actually lived it, he was all over the television, but mostly on Saturday night. He wasn't really around too much in the Nitro era, a little bit here and there, but he wasn't a feature performer by the time that the wars actually began. But in the early to mid 90s, I mean, he was there. He was, well, all the way until I remember one of his last matches was around 98, 99 that I can remember. But if you want to seek out a good Ice Train match, I will tell you this. He wasn't, if you're looking for great work rate, he was fine, but he wasn't like, don't expect, Okada, don't expect that. But the best match he ever had, and I remember this vividly because I went back to watch it, was, remember how they opened a pay-per-view with Fire and Ice, Scott Norton and Ice Train against the Steiner brothers?
It's my favorite one.
That's the best. That is the best tag team match of Ice Train's career, dude. What a phenomenal match. They threw each other around. It was beefy. It was basically like that Miro Powerhouse Hobbs match from All Out, but with four guys. It was great.
No, I'm with you. And DDP is the one who I think sent the news out to people. And so I'm sure we'll hear more about what happened. I know he had discussed a few years ago of dealing with a bad case of COVID. But yeah, just sad to kick it. I just didn't want to forget at the end of this and go, oh, I forgot to talk about Ice Train, because John and I, if you go on the Fight Game Media our podcast network, we just covered all of 1996, and we were talking about how awesome he and Scott Norton were, and then they turned them against each other, which was really stupid. And then at the end, Scott
got lost in the shuffle.
Yeah, Scott Norton joins the NWO at the very end of that year. So it's just like, man, what could have been if you would have just kept going with them? Okay, what we're really here to talk about is we both woke up to the news that WWE has a new television partner for Monday Night Raw, which is Netflix, which was not even really one of the hotly debated rumors when it came to where they were possibly going to have their show. Now, the sexiest rumor of all of them was WBD, just because that's where AEW has been.
You know what it reminds me of? Whenever there's a natural disaster and you go on Facebook, AEW has been marked safe on television. That's the first thing that popped in my head.
That is truth.
Yes.
And there were other streamers, and I know Brian Alvarez was very high on this one, which was Amazon Prime. Amazon Prime made sense to an extent, but I always thought if you go on Amazon Prime, there's got to be an overpay of some sort, and these tech companies just don't overpay for the content necessarily. What they do is they look for the the folks who are kind of struggling, and they kind of pick up the pieces because they know that they have the money and the resources to clean it up. And if you look on the surface, like, I think the number promoted for Raw, or the number that came out, was $500 million a year. Now they got $265 in their current deal on the USA Network. The 500 on the surface, if you go, $265 to $500, that's a crazy increase, but that's not exactly all that is involved in the increase. What is also involved in this increase are the US RAW rights and a lot of international rights for all of the shows.
Yeah, all the shows, and the pay-per-views and the PLEs
And
internationally.
and the most interesting thing about Netflix as a company is its global reach. So we focus on the US market, obviously, because that's where the money is for this stuff. It's a US product. And we look at it and we go, "Oh, yeah, like, this is this is the market and here's the money." And that's the big story, but the bigger part of Netflix is that their global reach is they have over 200 million subscribers all around the world. 76-ish is in North America. So think about that. There's like double the amount of subscribers outside of North America than there is in US and Canada. So that is a giant opportunity for WWE, who sees themselves as a global company, so much so that they're doing a PLE in Australia that I would have to wake up at like 2 o'clock in the morning or something.
Yeah, and they got one in France this year, one in Germany. But in this world, the thing is this. Okay, it's interesting that Netflix is expanding their live entertainment and sports packages. The reason why I think Amazon was so, I guess, talked about was because of the NFL on Amazon Prime, that Thursday game. And so it makes sense. We're living in a world now where you have this sort of interesting, I guess, trifecta of ways to consume content. You've got network television, over-the-air television, cable, and streaming. And the more time that goes by, that pie starts to change. 5, 6, 7 years ago, maybe even 10 years ago, Netflix was like the only one. They were the first ones to get a jump. Very small piece of the pie. And then you had like network TV and then cable TV. Now you see it shifting to where now we're starting to get to that era of eventually, a few years down the road, streaming is going to be the top one. It might take 10 more years, but it's going to happen. But I think we're going to see a lot of sports companies, NFL's doing it. I'm sure the NBA will have something lined up where they're going to start to split stuff everywhere. It just kind of makes sense to kind of have your fingers in every pot, But even if you take away the sports and entertainment packages, this is really nothing new if you followed the streaming wars, because the streaming wars, it's not just, it's not just Netflix, Prime. This goes all the way back to like even when Disney Plus first started. A lot of the movies that were Disney films were on Netflix.
Yep.
Boom, they're on Plus. Also, Cobra Kai was a YouTube streaming show for years. Then it moved to Netflix. And then if you notice, you've got like when Disney purchased Fox, all of the Fox content that was on Hulu, which is owned by Disney anyways, that got moved to Disney Plus. So you're going to have, I think for the foreseeable future, we're going to have situations where we're going to have brands moving all over the place. Don't be surprised if your favorite TV show jumps from 3 different streaming services in the next 10 years, just because that's how it is. Whoever pays the most and gives them the best deal. And Netflix is giving them a hell of a money deal. But you got to wonder, is Raw more valuable on Netflix with eyeballs than on cable? I don't know. You said 200 million. Is that even, or 200 million subscribers, right? Is that the number you said?
Yeah, over in their global reach, it is over 200 million subscribers.
Is that more than people that watch USA? Like, I wouldn't even.
Yeah, so I'll give you the numbers right now. So I think the attractive thing for WWE, and here's what is interesting. I'm going to read you guys a quote in a second from Ben Thompson, who runs a newsletter called Stratechery. It's like a tech and business newsletter. So the WWE, you remember the WWE Network? Everybody remembers the WWE Network. That network, while on the surface, I think most would say was maybe a bit of a disappointment because they could not get over that $1 million, their million number subscriber, right? That was kind of like their ceiling. But what it did was it allowed them to learn a lot about their audience because they had that data of who was watching and all that stuff. And that stuff is very valuable. So they took it from that level and they said, okay, now we have this information. if it would have got to 20 million subscribers, they would have never had to do anything else. That would have been printing money at that point. But they saw the ceiling. Okay, now we sell this to Peacock. And why was Peacock valuable? You already have a relationship with them, being that they are part of NBC Universal, but also they needed you because they were a burgeoning service, right? They were all of a sudden now into these streaming wars, which, by the way, the streaming wars are kind of over. Like, Netflix is Coke and everybody else is like Mr. Pibb.
I don't know about that, man. See, I mean, I'm not going to disagree with you because you do a show every week with Zarin about this. It just, I'm not saying that you're quote unquote wrong. I don't know, Mr. Pibb. First of all, I like Mr. Pibb.
Mr. Pibb is good.
Yeah, but I don't know. There has to be you wouldn't think that Prime would at least be Pepsi?
So I think when you're looking at all of the metrics that drive what I believe the wars are, subscribers is one, and Amazon Prime is a beast of a service, right? Like, that service, everybody has that service because you're buying goods. Like, you're a consumer. Right. As a consumer, you kind of need to have that.
It's kind of worth it too.
They have the NFL, like you said, which is those Thursday night games. So they are in the game, but I think they're playing two different games. If Amazon Prime was strictly a video service and they didn't have the Amazon store and the brand and everything else that predates it,
I see what.
Then they would be playing a different game.
Yeah,
Netflix
it's like two companies.
Netflix is in the game for one thing, right? And until a WBD just goes, you know what? Our entire strategy is Max because cable is diminishing. They're just playing different games. So Netflix is, when it comes to hours spent watching, when it comes to, the amount of shows that they license from other companies, like back in the day, HBO would say, there's no way in hell you're ever going to see HBO content on Netflix. Why would we do that? Why would we kill our golden goose? Well, you know what's on Netflix right now? There's a show with Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson that was on Netflix for like 5 seasons. Ballers is now on Netflix.
Yeah.
Right. And it kind of has you kind of get rebirth, and it's
not to mention that Peacock, I think, has the Rock biopic show or whatever, the Young Rock, right? That's on Peacock. Yeah, Rock's everywhere, bro. Rock is everywhere.
If Peacock licensed that thing to Netflix, it would have a new life that it did not have on NBC. So when I say that the streaming war is over, like, there are going to be competitors, and Max and Amazon Prime and Paramount Plus, Peacock, or whatever happens with Paramount.
Disney Plus is the other one.
These ones are gonna combine. Disney Plus is still a different business. What drives Disney? Their parks. Parks is their biggest business.
Disney Plus is the most surprising thing because they have not been doing as well as everybody thought they would be doing.
Yeah, and that's because it's hard. It's not their main focus. It is not where they have all of the biggest brains in that company are not focused on Disney Plus. They're focused on the parks. They're focused on the movies and such. So yeah, it's just a different. The Netflix is all hands on deck for this one thing. So yeah, I think so. That is interesting. But here's the quote that I was going to read, and this quote makes a lot of sense to me when it comes to WWE's value to Netflix and Netflix's value to WWE. It shows you that WWE is not, they are not the NFL, they are not the NBA, they are not UFC as far as how people perceive them in the ecosystem. So that if they're not like the top company, they're going to be helpful to Netflix for what I believe is to be kind of like the beginning of their live sports company.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. This is them showing, okay, we're going to play ball now. Yes, literally, this is the beginning of them saying, you want NFL? We're going to have our own thing. Because let me tell you something. I don't know if you want to save this for later, but seeing the Dwayne on the board, the first thing I thought of, because I watched that clip from CNBC this morning of Ari and The Rock on CNBC, is the next logical move has to be UFL, which is the XFL and the USFL's merger, that's got to be on Netflix next, right? Wouldn't that? They're already partners. Wouldn't that be a deal that The Rock would want to work out with Netflix to get some of the games on there?
It would be a very interesting test for sure, right? It's a small. The money would not really. I don't think the money would be groundbreaking for those guys for that kind of deal. But where it would benefit Netflix is it would give them data. It would give them, here's how people watch this stuff on our service. Is it more VOD? Is it more live? Are people checking in and checking out? Because in order to check out, you got to leave the app to go to a different app, right? That's what makes it hard with live sports and these apps. Is like, unless you're watching on the web, then you can kind of go browser to browser. But so you're right. But here's the quote from Ben Thompson. Perhaps the most important factor from Netflix's perspective, though, is that WWE is a sports partner that understands and appreciates the value in being part of a bundle. The WWE went it alone as a subscription network service previously, only to realize it missed the reach and lower costs of partnering with a network like USA. Netflix is giving it an even better deal, and WWE is smart enough to not try and take more. I suspect there are other leagues that haven't yet fully internalized that reality, and Netflix isn't going to want to be the one to educate them. Okay, so here's what that means to me. Now, that I'm going to try and, I could probably spend several minutes on just breaking down that paragraph. What it says to me is WWE, the value for Netflix with WWE is WWE is willing to be the experiment for live sports and Netflix and the example to the other leagues who brands Netflix wants to do work with. Because and here's what I believe Netflix is thinking they are going to show. They are going to show everybody, not just WWE, they're going to show everybody that their reach is so broad that there's going to be demand for WWE product in places that WWE themselves may not have even thought of going to for demand. So let's say, I don't know how much of the international content you watch on Netflix, but you do follow an international product in Dragon Ball. So you're very comfortable kind of going outside of the North American ecosystem to watch content.
Have to. I'm stuck.
Yeah. But you also were very comfortable when you were younger because you're such a fan of that content and you had to do it to see it. So Netflix,
right?
They have like Love is Blind, say, which is a reality show, their most popular reality show. They now do Love is Blind in like a bunch of different languages.
That makes sense. That happens to a lot of these shows.
Squid Game, right? Squid Game is an international show that became sort of a U.S. kind of.
Well, we knew this was going to happen. We didn't know, but we suspected it was going to happen really with the early days of the internet, because the whole thing about the internet was, well, we're all interconnected. If you go back and watch, it's very interesting. Go back and watch 1996's Cable Guy with Jim Carrey, where he says you can play Mortal Kombat with a friend in Vietnam. That was very ahead of the time because you literally can do that. And I mean, look what's happening with Godzilla -1. The movie gets a 1-week release in the US, destroys all Hollywood films as far as quality goes. It's been on theaters for 2 months now. And that, from 1 week to 2 months, people, I think, now are a lot more open to digesting international content, because the reality is international content, a lot of times, you can even ask Draven about this. He watches foreign films. They sometimes hit the mark where American movies don't. American products oftentimes are like a conveyor belt. Content, whereas international stuff still gets passionate. I mean, look at New Japan World. Who would have thought that New Japan would have an app that works in English? Even that is just thinking back to like when you and I started watching wrestling in the 80s and 90s. Look how far we've come.
Yes. So that is a leverage that Netflix has because they have the reach. They're going to use WWE as an example and go, hey, NBA, I know
Very good move.
I know you're asking prices this, but you can get that if you want to go to cable and maybe you go to Amazon Prime, but they're not going to be able to give you X, and which is that algorithm, right? That algorithm that makes hits out of things that people did not really believe were necessarily hits.
Not just that, but also the NBA oftentimes, actually NFL does it too. They play some games internationally. We've heard there was that huge game they played in Spain where Michael Jordan went out there with the NBA. So if
you mean in the Olympics, you mean?
No, not the Olympics. Remember they had that NBA game? It was an NBA game. It was with the oh God, it was like maybe 10 years ago. But Michael Jordan went out there as an NBA ambassador and they played a game in Spain. It was like a one game. But like you can have events like that, and if Netflix says, "Hey, the Lakers are really popular in, I don't know, Italy." They could run a game out there. It's all analytics, as you said. It's all data.
So WWE, being that they are not
valuable.
the NFL, they are not the NFL, because the NFL would not go, no, we don't want to be any experiment. We are the top product. We are giving you the top amount of eyeballs. You give us the top dollar. We're not taking $1 less. WWE may have been able to find a bigger deal out there in cable, but as we know, the cable bundle is going down, and soon, I would probably say even this time next year, there's going to be more Netflix subscribers in North America than there will be cable subscribers in North America. That thing is going like this right now. It's crossing.
Yeah. Do you think that there's a possibility that maybe Warner Brothers Discovery maybe even gave them an offer, but it just wasn't as lucrative? Maybe not lucrative money wise, but wasn't as appealing as the Netflix offer, like because the negotiations for sure happened. Like that's not even like this is not even this idea of, well, WWE's not talking to Warner Brothers. No, they talked. I mean, how much they talked, we don't know. Nobody knows except for the people in there. But that could have been a situation where they did give them an offer, and maybe Netflix's offer was just more like Ari and the board of directors looking 10 years down the road and not just like 5 or 3. You know,
yes.
I don't know.
Yes.
Because they got to start thinking about that. But again, think about where things are going. CW is a network, old school antenna station. USA's got SmackDown starting next year. That's cable, and then you've got the Netflix Raw. So again, everything's kind of shifting, but WWE, like NBA and NFL, still have games in different, I guess viewing, whatever you want to call it. What would you call it? Different like viewership options. There you go. That's the word.
Sure.
I guess.
Sure.
Yeah, sure.
Look, the old model is you sell your rights to all the cable partners across the world. And what WWE is saying right here and right now is we don't want to sell to cable, even internationally. The future is on Netflix. The future of streaming is Netflix. I guess the present of streaming is Netflix, and they find Netflix because they're putting all of their balls in the Netflix basket internationally and saying this is who we are riding with for this product because of that 200 plus million subscriber base outside or overall, including the US. The other thing that I mean, I'm fascinated by this, and I hope people are listening. By the way, if you are listening, Danny is going to be with me once a month for the rest of this year. So if you like Danny and I talking, hit that subscribe button and also hit the like button on this if you are, because we got the Netflix algorithm, we got the YouTube algorithm, we got to figure that thing out. You've figured it out pretty well, but I got to figure it out. You've done a great job figuring that out.
I've gotten so many gray hairs trying to figure it out, bro.
So,
I'm not even sure Oppenheimer himself could figure it out.
Mr. Beast can figure it out. Someone's got to ask him.
You know what? He knows.
Okay, so you mentioned WBD. Here's an interesting thing about WBD for AEW. I think as I look at what makes sense right now, because I know in the chat I'm seeing people talking about AEW and what rights increase they're going to get. Who knows what the rights increase is going to look like? The closer comparison to AEW when it comes to ratings, overall ratings. I'm not talking about pay-per-view. Obviously, NXT, you can't really measure what their pay-per-views do because they're not in actual pay-per-view universe.
Right.
NXT did not get that much money for their rights. I think they got like 30 million a year from the CW. 30 million a year for AEW would be a disappointment and a half. AEW, for all of their television, I don't know what that number is, whether it's going to be 100 million per year or whatever. They're going to need a bump. They are, I think, reliant on WBD seeing them for what they consider to be value. And I think this is also why Tony Khan was like a very good partner to WBD. Like, he's just like, yeah, I want to work with you guys because I see the future and let's be good partners. So he was a good soldier. But now it's really like, what could they get out of WBD? So they got 3 shows. They still have ROH sitting there for whatever reason. I still don't understand why it exists. But
same.
You have the opportunity to build through Max, right? So people who have HBO Max or Max, let's say, and they're doing this with the NBA right now for BR Sports, the Bleacher Report branding on Max. Bleacher Report is simulcasting NBA games on Max that are already on cable. So as I sort of envision what this could be for AEW, let's say that Tony signs a deal with WBD and we keep the rights on TNT and on TBS, and all of the pay-per-view goes on to Max, whether it is within the subscription or maybe on top of the subscription. But if you can then also simulcast all of your AEW shows on Max, you don't even need cable if you're an AEW fan. You just have to get a Max subscription, which is $20 or whatever it is. And then if you're just a hardcore AEW fan, you could drop the cable and just go, hey, I get my AEW here. Maybe I'll get Netflix, whatever. But I think that could be a fascinating thing for AEW. And that is also putting all of your balls into the WBD basket. And they're gonna deal with this cable issue that everyone's dealing with. But that whole thing is very interesting to me. So we have a question in the chat about the options of what this deal is. So WWE signed with Netflix for 10 years. How I believe this works is Netflix has the option to get out of this deal after 5 years. They also have the option to tack on 10 years at the end of the deal if they want to renew the deal. So if they see this deal all the way through and there's neither side, I don't know if WWE can opt out. It's possible that they could, but we just don't know yet of all the details. But we could see Monday Night Raw all the way through 2045 on Netflix. How crazy is that?
We'll be old, tired, and hopefully not working with children. Yes.
So, that is another piece to this that is fascinating to me. So I had a couple of other things that I wanted to quickly discuss.
Well, I did want to say one quick thing about the AEW thing. I know that for a while, Dave and many others were speculating on AEW getting a big increase for the next, renewal. And there's the only thing that I think would get in the way of that is a couple things. One would be the fact that their viewership is not where it was in 2021. That can be worked around, though, because you're kind of getting a package. It's not just, your views are down. There's obviously room for growth, but also there is a rumor, and this is not really even a rumor. It's one of those rumors that's like probably 90% fact, that the Paramount Warner Brothers and Paramount have been discussing a merger at some point. Now, I don't know if that's going to happen in the next 5 years, in the next 1 year, or never, but there could be a possibility that could have a factor as far as what they want to spend on this thing,
By the way, people watching, if you want to ask Danny a question or add to this topic, we will throw your question on as a super chat for 100%. So okay, so this is stuff that I've been doing a lot of research on as well, which is the WBD deal, because of you can't, they just don't want companies merging and merging and merging. They had to wait in order to be able to strike a deal again. So this year, I think it's in April, they can actually do another deal. They can merge, they can buy or whatever. There is that rumor
this year.
So there is that rumor of Paramount and WBD. The person I read from Puck News, his name's Bill Cohan, I think is his name. He says he believes NBC Universal and WBD makes more sense, which is hilarious to me.
That is hilarious.
Because then you would have Raw and AEW owned by the same company. So that
and Peacock is owned by NBC Universal.
Right. Peacock and SmackDown's going on USA, in October. So that whole thing would be quite the interesting dynamic with having both companies under that one umbrella.
I have a question about this. I'm not a mergers and acquisitions attorney, right?
M&A, you're not into the M&A?
No, I'm into it, but I'm not a lawyer, so I don't know if I have the knowledge to answer this. But if there's a merger with two corporations and there's a deal that's already been made, would that, in other words, if that merger were to happen, could either AEW or WWE opt out and say, well, we're going to shop our network, we're going to shop our programming elsewhere after that merger?
I'm sure that type of conversation is in the contracts that they signed. Well, who knows? We don't know that.
Yeah, that's a mergers and acquisitions lawyers do that, all that nonsense. They get paid big bucks to make paperwork.
Yeah. All right. A couple of other things here.
People think that lawyers, all they do is yell in courtrooms. No, most lawyers that I know, all they do is file over paperwork all day. That's like 90% of the work.
So here's an interesting question. What kind of Netflix account do you have? Do you have an ads-free Netflix account? Do you have an ad tier Netflix account?
Me? I borrow it from my friend, so I don't know.
Okay, well, what does your friend have? Ads tier?
I think he's got the regular ad tier. Yeah, I think so.
Okay. Because the Netflix is trying to push their customers to the ad tier. And you would think, well, why? If it's cheaper, why would they want more people in the ad tier? They actually make more money
because it's selling ads
off of customers,
of course,
who are on the ad tier.
And guess what? Live sports, WWE or otherwise, yes, wrestling is not going to get what NFL is going to get. But if you're Netflix, you can go to an advertiser and say, hey, we've got a Thursday night or we've got a Tuesday night football game or whatever. Say, we'll sell you 10 ads at this rate. I mean, that's how it works on YouTube. So for WWE, I don't know if that stigma for wrestling is still there. I guess it still kind of is. Maybe not as much as it was back in the day. But yeah, you could sell live ads during live episodes of Raw or live episodes of NBA or whatever they're going to end up putting on there.
So the funny thing about this is Raw is a live product, right? So
live sports.
It's a live product that has different subscriber tiers. There's one that doesn't want any ads, and there is one who is fine with the ads because they pay less for it. So what it sounds like, and I'm quoting Alex Sherman from CNBC, his piece he wrote earlier today. He wrote, Netflix announced earlier this month it had 23 million active users for its advertising tier. Matches will be scripted around commercial breaks to satisfy ad-free customers who will see continued action from live matches that aren't important to the outcome.
And you know what that means? That means no picture in picture.
No picture in picture. But
so Excalibur won't try to cram 10 sentences into one second.
The funny thing is that the example he used is such as a wrestler in a sustained headlock would be the opportunity to cut away for the ad tier and stay.
Randy Orton will be real happy about that one.
Exactly. That's exactly.
Randy Orton will be real happy about that, man.
It's like you could sell ads based on the wrestler, right? You're like, oh, You want to sell this ads during a Roman Reigns match? Well, here's the price. You want to sell it during, the Miz match? Here's the price. I just find that funny. I think they'll do it.
That mean our boy Phil Brooks might end up getting an even fatter wallet from this deal at some point, bro. Because the cut of that's got to go to the wrestler, right? You would assume, right? A cut of that's going to go to the wrestler. No, really?
No way.
So I mean, it could help their merch. Percentage is going to go to Roman or Rock or whoever's on TV.
No, it's just going to go to the company. They're gonna be able to sell it as inventory. But okay, but here's the more important thing, which is it could help the merch sales, right? If you have WWE fanatics, let's say, if you were to do a built-in ad break for your ad tier, but to the non-ad tier, it's Phil talking about his brand new shirt that came out and that you can go right now on WWE Fanatics. That would be a way to sort of gracefully work in certain things, because look, they just want to make money on top of money. They want to create more revenue streams. They want to create more opportunities. Andrew Zarian was telling me about injectables. Have you heard about this?
In wrestling? I know what injectables are, bro. That's what we're talking about.
So he was basically saying for these connected TVs, right? If you would basically throw an ad up, and if you had somehow,
I have that on my TV, and it has a button where you can click it. You can push the button to go to. Yeah, I have that on my TV.
It'll allow you to purchase.
They have us by the balls, don't they?
Look,
Big Brother's got us by the balls.
As we get more into this with the connectedness and the streaming, that's going to be more of a thing than it currently is, because just the technology will get better. Look, dude, Apple just dropped their Vision Pro. Like, if you're WWE,
I've got the Chinese bootleg version of that over here. I'll show it to you if you want. I'm for real. I have a Chinese bootleg version.
But like, if you're WWE, you're like, oh, if people are watching our show through this expensive headset, maybe they want like a specific piece of merchandise that you could only get through the Vision Pro. So there's so many opportunities that are out there. Okay,
soon we'll have that smell-o-vision finally, bro. We can smell the skank of, Nia Jax dropping a leg on your face. I don't know.
No, I'm out on that one. The scratch and sniff.
Yeah.
All right. What about Raw moving a day? Do you think they stay on Monday?
Didn't they say it's gonna still be on Monday?
Well, I think the plan is Monday, but sweet Nicky Khan, he's like, it could always move. Maybe there's a cost to it, but if you're Netflix, do you want to go up against the NFL for,
you're right. I mean, you're right, because now they would actually have the option too. It is going to be weird though, man. Like, it was already weird in 2000 to not have Raw, and if you go back even further, primetime, to not have WWF on Monday nights. That's just weird to me, because that's the one thing that makes Mondays bearable most of my life, is the fact that I have Raw to look forward to, except for those horrible mid-2010 years, but when everything was unwatchable. But seeing Raw on like a Wednesday, are they going to bring back Raw Thursday, and just call it that?
Well, okay, so let's say, and it'll probably be on Monday, but if you are a streaming product, why wouldn't you? Netflix is going to have the data, right? Netflix will know.
They'll know
what the perfect day is to go up to show.
And they'll know when people are checking out, if they're checking out the game or if there's a touchdown, they'll know.
Yes. So I think that's fascinating, because you could theoretically have Tuesday SmackDown, Wednesday Raw, Thursday NXT, and then all of a sudden AEW's got to find a new night, because they're not going to want to go head to head against Raw.
Well, Tony said years ago, AEW is not going to do Monday night because they'd be competing with the NFL and they have a team, so that'd be dumb. But are you saying that if Raw goes to Wednesdays, they would actually compete with that's going to be a tough night.
Well, I'm just saying,
Wednesday Night Wars for real this time.
Well, what I'm saying is that Netflix could push the show to the day that they think best. And if you're AEW, you probably don't want to compete every week with WWE. Maybe they're less concerned about competing with NXT. They could go heads up against NXT again, and their audience will probably not be that. They won't be that.
Yeah, they won't put Taker and Cena on every NXT every week.
Or they could, right? They could always do that. So
I don't know, man.
That's a fascinating piece of this. Here's another fascinating piece of this. October 2024 is when NXT moves to CW, right. SmackDown moves to USA. By launching this in January, they've created another restart, right? So you're going to have this souped up SmackDown show the day they go to USA. And I've already told Dave that is when they should do the Cody Roman title change. I don't know if they're going to do that. That's a long time away, but that would be the hook
from now.
That would be a hook to get the title on Cody if it's like Rock and Roman at WrestleMania, right? And
yeah, what you're talking about is putting something major on that first week.
They have to. Yeah, they have to put the biggest show possible.
They have to. I mean, let's not forget the first SmackDown. I was looking at the ratings the other day because I had forgotten what they were. The first SmackDown on Fox did like 4 million or something. It was like 4.29 million.
Rock and Becky Lynch in the first segment.
Yeah, and then they had the Brock Lesnar, Kofi Kingston 7-second squash that I still didn't like.
That was actually kind of stupid, though. You know why? Because
it was horrible. Longer
matches will build, and shorter matches don't usually mean anything for ratings. But okay, so then
I have a scoop about that, by the way, which I can tell you off air. I can tell you here, and we'll do it off air.
So, but the other thing is that starting in January, when Raw moves to Netflix, there's your day one, right? You peak in October for that SmackDown rating, and then you don't have to do Raw the same week, which would kind of like lessen the importance, and then you go in January with whatever that first Netflix Raw is going to be. So I think it's just so smart that they did it that way.
And it'll be the official road to WrestleMania beginning on that show. They're going to hype that up too.
Okay, last thing before we move to the Rock's piece of this, which is, do you think this helps AEW's prospects in their TV deal negotiations? The fact that WWE just got $500 million.
Absolutely.
You do.
How could it not? I think it helps them because now they don't have to worry about like what's Warner Brothers going to do? Trade AEW for TNA? It's not happening. They had the number 2 AEW brand, right? They have 3 shows. Like I said, I think the only thing that could stop them is people from Warner Brothers might say, well, your numbers aren't what they used to be, but you're also producing more television. And like you said, it's a bundle pack. It's not just Dynamite. It's 5 hours every week. I think unless the merger thing ends up being a problem, I think they would get more. But how much more? I couldn't even tell you. That's a question for Zarian, bro. I couldn't even tell you that.
So my thought is
they need more.
AEW's deal is far more reliant on what happens with the NBA than anything that happened with WWE just recently.
That's another factor.
Because if the NBA, I'm going to assume that they re-up with the NBA, even if they get less games, because it's just been such a big deal. And I think
the NBA's been on TNT since like when? Since the 80s, right?
In bits and pieces, probably on Turner since the 80s, because there was an Atlanta Hawks thing, but on TNT probably since like the 90s, at least the late 90s-ish time frame.
Right.
So if they lose the NBA, I think AEW becomes a little bit more valuable to them, and then they have more money. But if they sign the NBA, are they going to have enough money to give Tony what he wants, or are they going to play the, hey, we just gave out this billion X number of dollars for the NBA, we have to offer you less? And then does Tony say yes, or does he go find another deal elsewhere? Like, that's the whole piece of it.
Well, where's he going to go?
There's a little bit of a reaction.
Where's AEW going to go?
That is WBD's leverage, is it not?
I know, that's what I'm saying. That WWE is such a towering, somebody made a very, very intelligent post on Twitter the other day. Believe it or not, somebody says something intelligent on Twitter, and they compared Eric Bischoff versus Vince to Tony Khan versus WWE now. And they talked to one of the big points they brought up, which is so right, is that when Bischoff was going against WWE RAW, WWF RAW in 95, 96, Raw was running high school gyms and small arenas, and they weren't doing what they're doing now. Tony Khan has to contend with an absolute juggernaut now compared to what it was in the mid 90s. And that's crazy because, you know, we've talked about this, how the numbers back then were so nuts, how Raw and Nitro combined would do 10 million people. But it doesn't matter. The WWE TKO Endeavor, like, you know, conglomerate is not what Bischoff was beating in 96. It's not. And so that's why, like, AEW really...
Bischoff's company being a part of Time Warner back then was way bigger than Vince's WWF.
And I think it was bigger than even AEW on TNT now, because like you said, the NBA and everything. So, and of course, the big thing back then was Ted never wanted to give up wrestling. It wasn't until the mergers happened that he lost power. So, because Ted had a soft spot for wrestling because it carried him in the 80s and even before then. But I feel like, and that's a very smart thing he said, like AEW is not going up against what Bischoff beat. It's not the same. It's not apples and oranges as much as so many, or it's not apples and apples. So many fans want to like romanticize the Monday Night Wars. You and I were blessed enough to live through it. They want to live through something like that. You're going to have moments like that Tuesday night NXT AEW thing that felt like that once or twice a year, but it's just not going to be the same thing. So yeah, I think you're right. I think the NBA is bigger than WWE. I know some wrestling fans
by
not
6,
just
7,
that.
8x. Like it's they're not even in the same atmosphere.
I also don't think people understand how popular the sport of basketball, not just NBA, is worldwide. Even though the NFL is bigger in the United States, is the biggest sport, basketball internationally with FIBA and it is bigger. So it's just interesting to look at like perspective, you know.
So the yeah, but so back to this AEW thing. Actually, you know what? You made me think about something with this Bischoff conversation. Bischoff, you know why I think Bischoff is so jealous of Tony?
I don't think he's jealous, man.
I think he's extremely jealous of Tony, and I'm going to tell you why. Eric Bischoff, because you were just talking about this competition with WWE, right? Eric Bischoff saw this as like if I don't figure this out, like my career is over. Like,
you mean back in 95-ish?
Back 94? In 95, 96. Like, this is my opportunity to make my career and to be a businessman and to be a leader in this space. And, you know, whether or not he had dreams of becoming a higher up executive at Time Warner or not. And he looks at Tony Khan and he goes, well, all Tony Khan is doing is he is running the playbook that we all actually created, which is getting the TV companies to pay for content, and which Vince, you know, Vince really drove that to where it is today, right? So Tony Khan comes in this space in 2019. That is after WWE just got the last SmackDown and Raw deal.
Yeah, the Fox deal.
And Tony Khan looked at that and was like, oh, there is actually real money in this thing.
Yeah, right? The All In. It was the combination of All In and that. Yeah.
So I think it was probably more the numbers that Jericho and Omega moved internationally that made him think that. I mean, in the US,
it was the first main event for their pay-per-view. Yeah, it made sense.
But for it's for Wrestle Kingdom, because he saw that this
right. But I'm saying he went with Japan, that as the rematch
actually drew in the US, and so he thought, okay,
I've explained to people that Jericho and Omega had a whole new set of eyeballs for New Japan.
So he looks at that and goes, well, Tony Khan is just running this playbook, and Tony Khan can fail at this, and he's fine.
That's true. That's true. He's never. That's what I tell people. This I see a lot of people say a lot of dumb things, and you know me. I've been very critical of Tony Khan's behavior, but he's not going broke anytime soon. This guy could literally run AEW at a loss for 10 more years and be okay. He'll be
longer.
So longer. I know that.
He could run it forever at a loss.
But dude, that's what I try to explain to people though. Like, this is not a situation where, because they think like when Punk jumped over, oh, AEW's dead, bro. Okay, AEW might be in a worse condition now than it was in a year ago. You know, attendance wise, TV ratings wise, all that's true. No one's denying that. But as far as the company closing, that's going to only depend on how much money the Khans have, and they have a lot of money. So they have a lot more money than Bischoff ever had.
What really,
or any of the regional guys had.
What really is the factor in AEW dying is Tony Khan just deciding that he doesn't want to do it anymore.
Yes, and I said that to a buddy of mine this past week, and I said, if another CM Punk situation happens, there could be a day where Tony Khan, maybe when he's older, just sits back and throws up his hands and goes, I'm out. That could happen. And don't ever say it can't, because no matter how much you love something, when you get involved in it, man, and bad things happen to you, I mean, it can eventually, when you look at how much money you have, you're like, you know what? I don't need this stress. I'm out. I can't even blame him for doing that, because the wrestling business is the wrestling business.
Okay, let's close out with this topic, which is The Rock.
Yeah.
So The Rock is now on the board of directors at TKO. He is being paid $30 million over a few different cycles for his role. He now owns his name again. He licenses his name.
Poor Don Morocco.
He now licenses that name to WWE. He goes from making, I think they said he made less than $500,000 last year in the license that WWE owes him for in royalties. So he goes from 500,000 to 30 million based off of these stock offerings. And now, you know, when he made that line to Roman on Raw a few weeks ago about the head of the table, we didn't know he was talking about Roman and Triple H, because he's now Triple H's boss.
That's the funniest thing.
Not really his boss, but
because remember
he's higher ranked.
Remember earlier that day there was that talk of, well, Dwayne and Nick Khan were hanging out at that college football game, Now I'm starting to wonder if part of that conversation, if not the majority of it, was The Rock being groomed to come on as and yes, by the way, folks, when I use the word groom, I'm not talking about sexually grooming, okay? So chill out. We're talking about groomed as far as like getting, you know, his pussy pampered to be a little more, not literally, okay, it's figuratively, to come on board. But also, if I think about this from what I've learned about business, I run a small business. The Rock had to have been talking to Ari and that group, Mark Shapiro, for a while before the Nick Khan thing, right? Like, the Nick Khan was probably a nice lunch and let's meet up, but the conversations on the phone had to have been going on for weeks.
So Rock has been friends with Nick Khan for a long time. Have you heard their stories of when they were in Hawaii together? And Rock is also really good friends with Nick's sister.
Really good friends with Nick's sister, bro.
Like from when they were like teenagers back in the day.
No, I didn't know that they were friends with his. I know that they were homies. I knew that, but I didn't know that he was friends with his sister. I didn't know any of that stuff.
There's a story.
He didn't show her the people strudel, did he?
No, I don't think so. There's a story out there that this is really funny. So Nick Khan, I believe, was Tim Tebow's agent. You remember Tim Tebow, the college football player? Of course,
I'm in Florida. That was our guy.
So supposedly there were talks, and I don't know exactly this time frame, but supposedly there were talks of Tim Tebow facing the Big Show at WrestleMania.
For some reason, that sounds familiar. The Big Show always gets fed to these like non-wrestling outsider guys. Rocky Bono, Floyd Mayweather.
They should have changed his name.
Cormier in there, bro.
They should have changed his name from the Big Show to the Insider, because he's facing all the outsiders. But remember when the rumor was that he was going to be called Big Titan when he came over from WCW back in the day?
There was also the Big Nasty. I remember the Observer and the Torch said it was going to be the Big Nasty.
The Big Show of all the names. Okay, so at that time, I guess Triple H was handling the negotiation with Nick Khan, and Nick Khan said something to the effect of, Oh, I remember you from WCW Terrorizing.
That he's jerking his ass, bro.
Well, but I think Nick Khan, because of his association with The Rock, probably a little bit bigger of a wrestling fan, but he may have been like
not that he
kind
was
of
messing with him,
well,
bro.
or pulling rank a little bit, right? Like a little bit, like
It's like if somebody comes up to you and goes, "I remember the Ball So Hard podcast," like it's or somebody brings up Super Friends to me, which there's a very small number of people that remember those days.
The only one who brings up the Ball So Hard podcast is Draven. He's the only one.
Yeah, because we pop at that name.
So that makes me laugh. But basically, I'm saying that The Rock and Nick Khan have been friends, and Rock has been on the Endeavor side for a long time. So that's Ari Emanuel. And so I think the and Meltzer and I said this, gosh, last year, maybe even 2 years ago, in that when the sale talking about, oh, who's going to buy WWE, who's going to buy WWE, we said whoever buys WWE should work with Dwayne, because if you could have Dwayne as the face of your company,
he's a brand ambassador now for real.
And now he kind of is in that role, right? Like if you are pitching WWE, or if you are utilizing all of the marketing power of WWE, you don't send Vince, you send Dwayne. And Dwayne and Vince are still tight. So I'm sure Dwayne knows all of the points. But now, if The Rock is the guy who's in all of these media things and who's the ambassador for, like, it's just silly for it not to be working that way. So I find that part of it extremely fascinating. Okay, so he gets his name back.
And like I said, I do think at some point he's gonna negotiate for the UF. I just feel like it just makes sense.
I'm sure he is working that right now. Okay.
Has to.
Here's the other part of this, and then we can go after this. I love the parts of Dave's writing, because Dave wrote, I don't know if you saw this, but Dave wrote an article on this whole thing. The Observer doesn't come out till Friday. So this is like a preview of what's going to be in the Observer on Friday that he posted behind the paywall to the website today. So that was actually cool, because I know that we've been talking about doing that forever, but Dave finally did it today. So
and you'll have to add to it with all the phone calls coming up, with more information coming up this week.
So yeah, exactly. It'll be a living article essentially until it's published on Friday. So basically, there's a small paragraph in this thing that talks about The Rock and Roman Reigns match. Now, it's still undecided. Dave believes that The Rock wants it to happen at WrestleMania. Dave sent me sort of a cryptic message yesterday, which essentially said, there's some stuff happening with The Rock. I cannot say anything, but there's stuff moving. And he trusts me enough to not then go on Twitter and say, oh, something's happening with The Rock. Keep your eyeballs. He trusts me not to do that. So when that news came out today about The Rock being the TKO guy and everything, there's a small paragraph in Dave's piece which basically says they are talking to Saudi Arabia. And the reason why they're talking to Saudi Arabia about Rock versus Roman, and this is me speculating, I just understand what is going on in other sports over there. Anthony Joshua and Francis Ngannou are about to have a fight in Saudi Arabia.
I'm excited for that one.
For crazy money, right? They're not going to sell any pay-per-views, but it is going to be hosted in Saudi Arabia, and it just becomes like the event. It's this whole...
I mean, the Saudis have literally endless amounts of money.
Yeah, it's the whole sports washing thing, which is what it is, right? So Vince, I believe, I am adding to the context of what they are, what has been stated. Now that Dave did write about it, I believe that Vince wants to sell The Rock against Roman as one of those Joshua and Ngannou kind of fights. So WWE already has a deal with Saudi Arabia. We already know they get 2 shows, X number of dollars. But Vince sees this as the prize fight of all prize fights and wants to get even more money from Saudi Arabia. So that would be a reason if it doesn't happen at WrestleMania, that would be a reason that that you would hold it off for another time. So
I am
that,
continuously being told that Cody and Roman is still the plan. I know you and I have talked about it in the DMs, and you seem to believe it's Rock. I'm not even saying you're wrong and they're right, but the dude I'm talking to is so confident they haven't changed the Cody plan and that Rock will be involved at WrestleMania, probably to screw Roman over by stopping Solo's interference. And then they could do, and then I asked, is it Rock, Roman, and Saudi? He says, I don't know. Well, that would just make sense.
yeah. So that is the piece of Dave's whole story that I imagine people are glossing over and not even aggregating, but what I think was the maybe even the most important thing that Dave wrote outside of the Netflix thing. So
Well,
that is something to keep an eye on.
correct me if I'm wrong, but I seem to remember reading that recently. Didn't Vince negotiate for a UFC show in Saudi? He was the guy negotiating that.
He was the lead. He's got the relationship, but
but
guess
what's
who pushed back on it?
Ari?
No, the Saudi Arabia pushed back on it because they basically said we need a better card than what they're offering.
Oh well, but but here's the thing that's funny about that. If you do your homework on WME IMG, which is Endeavor, there was when that whole controversy happened in 2019 with that reporter in Saudi, Ari contacted then President Trump about it. Like there was a lot of, and I don't know the details of this. Please don't do your own research, but from what I understand, Ari Emanuel does not really like the goings on in that country. But I guess when Vinny steps up and there's money involved, you know what I mean? Like, but you know what I mean?
He had to step back on that one because it just makes too much business sense for them to be involved if you are buying WWE, right? You have to kind of be okay with that. That's part of the price of doing business with WWE is like, oh, we have to do business in this way now. And
I do have an interesting thought experiment for you. I think you'll like this. Okay. This will be fun. You could even ask Dave this if you want. If we're in a world where Vince does not get caught in that scandal in 2022, the big scandal with the paying off the women and all that stuff, the one. And then if you remember, because people forget this detail, Rock and Cena kind of stepped away a little bit from WWE because there was a lot of rumors about Cena coming back. Yeah, they were like, whoa, hold on, this is too spicy. If that never happens, does Vince not only stay on board, but would he still have been the guy doing all this, being the spokesperson, do you think? Or do you think just his age? I mean, I feel like eventually in the next 5 years, he would have eventually stepped down. But do you think Rock even becomes a board member if Vince didn't get caught up in that drama from 2022?
You're right. It's a great question for Dave, and you should send me an email so that I can ask him on Friday.
Well, I'll DM it to you.
Fantastic question. Yeah, it's a fantastic. No, send it an email because that's how I'll be able to make sure to remember. Yeah, that's how I remember. Like it's the mailbag. If anyone wants to send me an email, by the way, gg@fightgamemedia.com. But a couple of things I think are very interesting is if that stuff doesn't come out, because we knew that stuff was there, but he just had NDAs signed. There was the Rita.
Oh boy, NDAs.
Right, and there was the referee. Remember, what was her name? Rita. Was it Rita?
Oh yeah, the referee from the 80s. Oh,
yeah,
back in she was at Russ. She was on one of those Saturday Night's main events, and then we never saw her again. Yeah.
She came forward. What was it, like 2 years ago, to basically say that he raped her, right?
Yes,
and then I think he settled with her.
Yes,
because we haven't heard about that since. So that whole thing is such a part of Vince's story going back to the 80s, which is, all of these things can happen, but we just pay them off and we have them sign NDAs and we're fine. But you're talking about the mom and pop version of WWE and then once you become a public company and once you become as big as they got, like their success makes that totally information come out and makes people cover that a little bit more closely, like a real company. So yeah, I'm sure that is definitely part of it. And I think we're all for the better, right? That this dude is out of control.
I mean, for sure. I think we are all for the better. Plus, I'll be honest with you, man. This is gonna. I don't really talk. We're not here to talk about this type of stuff, but these like sex pests, like that have been doing this type of stuff for years, like they need to go down. The first time I know what an NDA is. I'm not stupid, but the first time I had ever heard of an NDA being used to protect a sexual, controversy is when I saw that R. Kelly documentary on Netflix, that huge 20-part one where he had that one lady. What blows my mind is that it's a woman. These lawyers, some of them have no heart. It's a woman who could be herself one day, could have been caught up in something like this, who's sitting there like, well, we have all these NDAs signed. And it was so disgusting that these wealthy guys can get lawyers to write up NDAs to protect them from doing actual prison time and crimes. We've heard about this happening all the time for centuries. The rich always get away with stuff. So ultimately, as much as like, I don't hate Vince McMahon personally, but it's good that sometimes an NDA is not enough, and it shouldn't be. I especially with that R. Kelly documentary, because it just feels like it's ridiculous. It's just
and you want to go further down that rabbit hole?
It's up to you, man.
No, we don't have to, but I'm just saying, if you wanted to, who leaked all of that stuff to the Wall Street Journal?
Do we know?
No, we don't know. Because that's what ignited the whole thing, right?
It had to have been one of the victims or somebody who knew one of the victims. Didn't one of the reports say it was somebody who was friends with one of the victims that heard it?
I think that was one of the sources of information for sure.
Yeah.
Anyways, that's going to be in that Vince there is a Vince McMahon documentary coming to Netflix.
But
you know this, right?
Okay, but now that WWE is involved with Netflix, are they going to make some changes here and there? And
WWE is involved in this documentary from the beginning. You know who else is involved in this documentary? Bill Simmons is involved in this documentary. His company. And you know who else got interviewed
your boy
for this documentary? Dave Meltzer.
Well,
he's been to 2 different like long recordings on this documentary because they had to change some of it when the company got sold. So kind of the narrative changed a little bit. So he just went back like 2 weeks ago to do more interviews for it. So
I didn't know
coming out. Yeah.
I thought the one that Dave was talking about was Dark Side of the Ring when they did their Vince.
No, that one sucked.
Yeah, that one was
like worst documentary of the year.
Yeah, it was a clip show. It was stuff that they had already shown before. Terrible. Yeah, I thought that was the one. Yeah.
No, it's worse. But anyway, no, because there were actually 2 things in play. There was this Vince documentary, and then there was a docudrama, sort of like The People Against OJ. Did you ever see that one from back in the day?
No, there's a new isn't there a new one that came out a couple of years ago on was it, I think it was on Peacock, wasn't it, like a 10-part, or maybe it's a TV show, I don't remember. I know that I did a deep dive on OJ 2 years ago, and I watched all 22 episodes of the Court TV. Dude, it was 22 hours of the Court TV coverage, and I watched it all. I was hooked.
So this People Against OJ is actually really good. I think it was on FX or something, but it was
maybe I was thinking of the one where Cuba Gooding Jr. is in one of them, right?
He's OJ in that.
Yeah, that's the one. Okay, that's a biopic.
No. It is a docudrama television show.
Right.
It's a television show. It's like a multi-episode television
that
show.
I did hear about.
You know who else is in that? Did you ever watch This Is Us?
Don't think so.
So Mandy Moore.
I know Mandy Moore.
Like that was like a pretty giant TV show for NBC.
Remember when Mandy Moore was going to UFC shows? Remember those days?
I remember Mandy Moore when she was a singer. That's how far I go back.
Me too. That was TRL era.
And so Sterling K. Brown, who is in a movie that everybody should see right now called American Fiction. It's the best movie that I've seen in the theaters in quite a while.
Well, there's a reason for that.
American Fiction?
No, there's a reason why it's the best movie you've seen.
Yeah, because according to you, I haven't seen Godzilla yet in the theaters. But it's just I haven't been able to do it. But anyway, we went off tangent. Okada, there's an Okada story that it sounds like has been. There was a rumor that he was gonna join WWE and be part of the NXT brand. It sounds like that rumor's been deflated. I've seen Sean Ross Sapp deflate it. I've seen Dave deflate it. So I think if you were someone who was asking about Okada in the chat earlier,
somebody did ask. Yeah. I don't think we're gonna have an answer for that until it's actually a done deal.
Yeah, and he can't show up anyway until after February, so it's not like he could even show up in the Royal Rumble.
Man, Wrestle Kingdom is done.
Yeah, that's a different topic for another day. But yeah,
It
I'm
is.
a little bummed about that. Okay, so
Me
first,
too.
thank you to Danny for doing this. I just threw it on him literally 2 hours ago. So he created the space in his day to do it. I really appreciate it. I needed to get this stuff off my chest because I didn't have Andrew to talk about this with. So Danny was there. We were able to do a little bit of breaking news or broken news on the YouTube channel and on the podcast feed. So yeah, D and I will be back next week, or I'm sorry, next month, probably after the Elimination Chamber show. Probably
Maybe.
we'll both watch it a little bit on a delay because I can't watch that thing live. But I think
Oh, I'm waking up for that one, bro.
I think the plan is that we'll try and record something sometime after that show. So the next time you see Danny on this channel will be Elimination Chamber. All right. Thank you to everyone for checking us out. Thank you for subscribing. Thank you for liking. For Big D, I am Double G. We will see you when we see you. Peace out.